Hi everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. Hot August nights, man. It's still, geez, somewhere around 90 degrees and it's 7 o'clock. So what am I doing? Working in a hot shop because I don't know any better. Today we're looking at Claire's McCulloch Super 55. Yes, I know I've crossed over to the dark side of the force working on a McCulloch, but that's okay. You know, I'll work on anything. I've mentioned that before. So what we had going on, he wanted to get this saw running and it was leaking a lot of fuel out of the carburetor, so I ordered a kit based on the information that he'd given me, and was lucky enough that I found the right one. This is an old Tillotson HL-19C. Just you know, there were so many versions of these Tillies. This one, made from McCulloch, is set up with a spring-loaded throttle butterfly, so you actually have spring. It naturally, when you're not installed, it actually defaults to an open throttle position. So it's got a throttle design in there that works with that. The same is actually true on the choke. Now, again, just unique stuff. But what was going on after I put this new kit in, I use a pressure tester to try and make sure that the needle was seating properly, and I was getting a leak, and I don't know how well we're going to get focused, but you see this little opening right here, that is a vent hole, and if I can get this apart, you see that that's a wide open area and there's one hole that goes through. When you pop this cover, it's just straight through. So what that is a air release so that this diaphragm can move up and down and not get stuck in one position or the other. So no big deal, that's fairly simple technology. But the funny part is, with the entire thing installed, that's what it would look like. So you put your pressure gauge, your pump, on this fuel barb. Well, I was getting air coming out of that vent hole, and there's no way in hell that these should ever mix. And I went through, verified, looking at the old gaskets versus the new. There was no good reason for it. Now, I've come across this before. These aluminum parts, after decades, can warp, and the most common one is this fuel base. And you can see how the gasketed surface here, where the gasket's going to ride, is nice and shiny, and the dull stuff's over here. Well, I spent some time with some 200 grit sandpaper. I scratched that, I think it was 400 grit. I'd have to look again, but it's really fine, wet, dry sandpaper. Laid it out on the bench that I know is flat and just did a nice circular sand, kind of like that. But when I started off, I was mottled in here. I mean, it was not sealing across through here, out in here, and you can see there's actually a milling defect all the way the hell out here. Now, that's just an index pin, and that's a screw hole. So there's enough surface here for the gasket to catch. I have not bolted this up yet to make sure that I've gotten everything out and flat enough that it will seal, but having experienced this before, I suspect it'll be right. And if you see a video shortly of a McCulloch Super 55 running, you'll know I got it. Okay, so got that reassembled. Still had a slow leak. Well, I'll take that back. A slower leak. Fuel turret is nylon, plastic, Bakelite, whatever the hell it would have been back in the late 50s, early 60s. So it was leaking around here, even with a new gasket in there, and that made no sense until I looked really closely. And this part, over the years, from being tight in there, has flattened out, and it's now nearly a 1/16 inch in diameter bigger than it used to be. So it wasn't recessing down into the receptacle there in the carburetor like it was supposed to. So I knew I was getting an air leak around there. I could feel it, but I put some soap around here and around where it had been leaking. Where is it? Right there. Thumb was over it. Wasn't leaking up here anymore, so my kind of impromptu mill job worked fine, but it was leaking like hell, bubbling up all over here. And I'm not going to put any more soap on it because I don't need to. But the way this vacuum gauge or pressure gauge works, you just put that on your fuel barb, pump it up, but it helps to close the bleeder valve first. And we can see that is holding just under 9 psi and only very slowly bleeding off. Now the needle seat in this carburetor kit that I got was not correct, so I wasn't able to replace that. And the O-ring is cracked ever so slightly down in there. But realistically, as long as this thing doesn't hit 0 in the span of 2 minutes, I'm fine. And it's not going to, because you really need to only test these to about 6 psi. In theory, that's about all the pressure that a hot fuel tank is going to have in there. So anyway, this part is a success. I'm going to get this thing bolted back together. It's too late to try and run it tonight, but I'm sure going to give it a shot tomorrow.